I was sitting all alone in my library chair when I found a book and it gave me a scare. The pages I kept turning, it quite took me in. What was it? Oh, where do I begin? We read the monsters. I read the monsters next door. The monsters. It had short stories galore. The monsters. It's full of horror and gore. The monsters. I read the monsters next door.
At a cursed crossroads where souls collide, see the Prince of Darkness, see the Prince of Lies, while the world lies sleeping and the moon's aglow. They may meet with the devil, you know. When your heart is quaking and your soul can't rest, open up the pages of the devil you know best. People face their demons as each tale unfolds, but the devil's in the details, and their fate's been sold. Yeah, their fate's been sold, and they're lost to hell. That's the deal you have to make with the devil you know well.
Once upon a modern time, in a little cul-de-sac, black characters from myth and rhyme decided to come back. They moved into a cuter house, they bought a boat and car, they got a job, they got a spouse, they're ready to go far. This modern life, with all its strife, is wilder than before. You won't forget the day you met the fables next door. You won't forget the day you met the fables next door.
The good dude is evil incarnate. He wants your soul on a spit. He opens up the gates of hell and he tells you you're it. You've got to fight or be damned. Eternity is at stake. The only thing that you can do is stay alert and awaken. Shoot the devil. You're an old scratch on the run. Shoot the devil. You tell that rascal he's done. Shoot the devil. And not today, Satan. Shoot the devil. Get lost now, I'm done waiting. Bang, you're dead. It's Shoot the Devil 2, Dark Matter for Crucifixion Press, now on Amazon.
And welcome back once again. It's been an eternity since we last convened. I don't know about you, but I can't wait to meet our guests, Daniel Humphreys, Declan Finn, and Michael Gallagher, the brilliant minds behind the anthology series Shoot the... Oh, for the love of... These guys again? That's it. HR's going to get a nasty complaint about this. I'm claiming hostile work environment. I don't have to take this. I have some forms to go fill out. The rest of you, feel free to settle back in your electric chairs and welcome our infernal host, Damascus Mincemeyer, as he gets on with
Hey, what's up, guys? Can
the
you hear
damn show.
I love that intro. Right. Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Damn Show on the Critical Blast podcast. I'm your host, Damascus Mincemeyer. Our regular host, RJ Carter, isn't here tonight, as he just discovered his destiny is to rule a future utopian society through his music, and he's been whisked away in a time-traveling phone booth. Don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow with a bevy of historical figures and in tow. And in the meantime, I'll be interviewing some of the contributors from the Crucifixion Press anthology series Shoot the Devil. The original volume in the series was released in 2022, and the sequel, Shoot the Devil 2 Dark Matter, was released last fall. And now a third volume, I believe, is going to be called Martyrs Militia, and they are looking for contributors. So let me introduce everybody tonight. We've got Daniel Humphreys, Michael Gallagher, and Declan Finn. Hello, gentlemen. It's nice having you on tonight.
Howdy.
We just lost Mike. So I've talked to Declan before. Have I talked to you, Daniel? Have you been on here before?
I don't think so. I'm usually good with faces and bad with names, and I don't remember either, so probably not.
Okay. Hi, Mike. Nice to see you.
Hey, what's going on?
All right.
I hope I stick around this time.
How's your ear? How's your ear doing?
Still not good, but I'm not stone deaf like I was 5 months ago. I'm still in the process of getting stuff like appointments set up and things like that. So it's better than it was. Well enough that I felt like I could come and embarrass myself on a podcast for a while. So there's that.
All right, let's go around and introduce. I already introduced everybody. Let's go around and have everybody tell what their story was in and which volume of Shoot the Devil it was in, so the audience can familiarize themselves. Let's start with Daniel.
So my story was in the first volume, and it was actually a prequel to my urban fantasy series. Paxton Locke basically is a guy who has the ability to speak to ghosts and among other things, and he has to do an exorcism for a serial killer. So that was my story.
I remember that one. That was a good one. I remember that one. Okay, Declan, your story was in volume 1, if I remember correctly.
I had one in both. First one was a particular demon killer who was working off penance, and my short story was, well, this one demon just wouldn't go down, and he has a little help. That one was called Send a Monster. I think the other one in volume 2 was called Mark of Cain, which was a prequel to my current space opera series, White Ops. And it involved a possessed person on a space station. And the real question is, what the heck does a demon want on a space station? And the answer was, well, explosive. And that's the short version.
I remember your story had the first volume had I really liked it because it had a nice twist at the end. I won't blow it for anybody, but that was pretty clever. I like that.
Thank you. It was, somebody had put a prompt of, so has anybody ever found a story where the hero is working off redemption? It's like, you mean aside from the first 5 people I can think off the top of my head? It's like, I can work with that.
You're right. All right, Michael, tell us about your stories.
Sure. I was featured in both volumes 1 and 2. In 1, I had written a short story, Last Chance Lane, in which you have sort of an everyman, or rather a couple of friends who had grown up with a tragic event in their past where one of their friends had died going into the neighborhood haunted house on sort of a dare to see if it was really inhabited by the ghost of a butcher doctor, sort of, and they found out in very visceral fashion that it indeed was, and later in life wind up teaming up with a local priest who handles things like exorcisms and things like that, and they sort of go about spend the rest of their lives sort of taking on kind of cases of that sort of nature, and eventually um, fate happens to find them back at the old house where they lost their friend, and they take that on. In volume 2, which actually is volume
Yeah,
1
oh, cool.
and volume 2.
Awesome.
Sorry, my lighting's
I
not
love
great.
the cover art on both of those.
I wrote the short story "And Hell Followed with Them," in which a sleazy magnate who starts a sort of a SpaceX type of company, but he's looking to sort of angle it towards space tourism. Hires a couple of disgraced former astronauts to help him launch sort of like a pilot trip to see that it can be done with this new ship he's built. And they chart a course towards a very real and very ominous exoplanet called TRES-2b, which is this seething black, super hot planet that's 750 million light years, I think, away. And when they get into its orbit, they find that things start going very, very strange. And the trillionaire magnate who's tagging along starts acting very erratically.
Awesome. So the third volume, I believe, which Crucifixion Press is seeking submissions for, it's going to be called Martyr's Militia, and is the first two volumes, I guess, had a theme. The first volume was just kicking evil's ass, and the second volume was science fiction horror. What is the third volume? Like, what is the theme for that? Does anyone know? Just anyone?
Mike?
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Declan.
No, I said Mike. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I've been kind of knocking ideas together, most with Eric Postma, who is the editor, and the chief at Crucifixion Press. He's sort of the guy running the show. But
hi, Eric, if you're watching.
This, yeah. Hey, Ginger. The theme, as it were, is just sort of that. Whereas the first two volumes had been invitation only, we are throwing open the doors to submissions. It's open, much like in the first volume, whereas you can pretty much write whatever you like. The first volume had everything from Weird West to sort of urban fantasy to really a little bit of everything. It was a great little sampler. And that's fine now too, of course. But now it's open to submission, which is where the militia aspect happens to come into it. It sort of reflects the volunteer nature of the stories.
That's pretty cool. And so, anyone who's watching right now and wants to submit, where's the information for that? Like, where can they find Crucifixion?
Sure. They can go to shootthedevil.wordpress.com, and there is an FAQ page that will tell them everything they need to know. And if they have any questions that isn't answered on the FAQ page, there's also a contact page. You can also contact Eric Postma through gingermaneditorial@gmail.com. That's on the FAQ page too, if you want to just reach out to him directly and you have a question. But pretty much all the questions anyone would want to know in terms of word count, what's acceptable, deadlines. The deadline is May 1st, 2024. Really anything you'd probably want to know is going to be on that FAQ page. But if there's anything that's not, you can always reach out to us there.
There's a great resource site called the Horror Tree, where publishers can put their submission calls also. I know I've told that about Howard. I've told that to RJ before about the Devil You Know Best. So that's you can attract a lot of attention that way.
Okay.
And it's also a good resource for writers looking to find places to submit stuff. So that may be a tool to gather additional submissions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We
Are the are, re, are
yeah
reprints are reprints allowed in this volume?
that's that's funny. After I just got done saying any question you'd want to know is probably on the page. That's not on the page. My understanding is that we do want exclusive content. We Crucifixion Press keeps the rights for a year, and then you have it the rights revert back. I don't know necessarily if a reprint would be off the table if it was really good. You would probably want to reach out to the press through the FAQ page on that. I'm not sure, but I think what was intended, like the first 2 volumes were all original material. I think that's probably what he's looking for now, but never hurts to ask.
That's right. So the mission statement for the Shoot the Devil series is like two-fisted action, like a very pulp feel, and good triumphs over evil. Because I remember Declan, especially before, was saying one of the first time we were together that horror, especially nowadays, has a very nihilistic feel to it, like a hopeless kind of feeling and these stories in these volumes were intended to counteract that. So let's go into taking that into account. Let's go to where you got the ideas for your stories and how you apply that sort of mindset or tone to your fiction. Start with you, Daniel.
A pizza dream. Honestly, yeah, I mean, honestly, the genesis of Paxton Locke was a nightmare I had, and it was about a guy that lived in a house and that he didn't realize was haunted, and I woke up and I wanted to know what happened next. So that kind of was where it spawned off from there. I've just kind of thrown the kitchen sink at it because it incorporates, you know, alternate history, political thriller, Lovecraftian themes. It's just a little bit of everything. I like my joke I like to make is so in the book, the good guys are Division M, which is a government agency, and I say, you know, it's fiction because it's a competent government agency that's, you know, keeping America, you know, safe from, you know, just any sort of odd, you know, monster you can think of. I try to avoid like werewolves and vampires are kind of played out, so I very pointedly try to avoid that. And I've always tried to come up with something different. I just pretty much write what I like to read.
Excellent. There's a asking feel to it. So that's I distinctly remember your story. I think was it the first story in the first Shoot the Devil volume?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yes, I remember that one. That was a very, very good one. Yeah. All right, Declan, let's go to you now. Let's you answer that question.
Well, I told you about the first one where I was. The prompt was, well, gee, does anyone have a character who was working off a redemption? It's like, okay, who is the most evil bugger I could come up with that, you know, and let's make sure that the details are vague because that way I don't have to worry about getting the historical details right. I'm a historian by training, so it's like, yes, what are the exact particulars of Victorian dress? It's like, no, stop it, bad. That's why I don't do historical fiction. Otherwise, I'm just going to fall in and not come out.
Research,
so that was Shoot the Devil. But yeah, that was Shoot the Devil 1, and with number 2, it was okay. We need demons in science. We need demons in space. I've got a sci-fi series already going. White Ops is something I've been working on for more than half my life at this point. So it's very easy to just drop into the world, throw in a demon and see where the party takes me. Thankfully, most of my life I have been a discovery writer.
Mhm.
God, I hate that term. It's so pretentious. Anyway, but it was simply a matter of, wind up the characters, drop them into the plot, throw plot points at them, and, have a shootout commence. And this was the biggest problems were how the demonic and the science fiction would interact together. It's like, so what does one do on a Dyson sphere running on a solar powered fusion generator, and what can you do to it? What can a demon do there? The answer is it's in space. Space is actively trying to kill you. Pick an option, any option. But then it's, we're going to have, the Exorcist versus a Heinlein SWAT team, and the Heinlein SWAT team takes a beating. And
oh, I'm sorry.
no, again, it was just
All
off
right.
to the races from there. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the first time I interviewed you, I wanted to remind the audience that you have a very impressive body of work. At that time, you'd written 30 novels or so. It may have
That.
grown by now. That was about a year and a half ago.
Well, I stopped counting around book 35. I should probably go back and actually do a count again, but my my last year and a half have been a little bit busy. You might be able to tell that this isn't the same background I had before, because I've moved from New York to Texas, buried one parent, and written 5 books in an urban fantasy series in the meantime. They haven't come out yet because my publisher has decided, you know what? Amazon is pulling some tricks. We're going to take our back catalog and go wide with them. No longer Amazon exclusive. So they've been trying to catch up with their multiple dozen volumes. So so I've had time to work on my books. It's like, okay, fine. Hey, you guys done? Great. Here, have 5 books. I'm out.
How many different series do you have, like, exactly? 'Cause you mentioned the White Ops series.
Oh, White Ops, St. Tommy, Love at First Bite. Going to be a question of whether or not you want to add the current series I'm working on, which is basically a continuation of. But so let's just call that 3. I've got the thriller series, my murder mystery series, my international thriller series. So about, at least, let's call it 6 series for right now. I might have 1 or 2 more kicking around that I don't remember offhand, because it's been a few years since I've worked on them.
One-man entertainment force. I like that, though. Unbridled creativity. I love that. And so, Michael, how would you answer the original question? Like, how do you apply the, like, positive, pulpy, sort of two-fisted action to your fiction? Because your novel, Body and Blood, is very very action. Yeah, it's very very action packed. Tell the audience about that book.
So my one singular novel, now that we've just heard about Declan's 3 dozen, Body and Blood, sort of came out of a desire to write a story that was fun and had a lot of action, and that was fun, but that utilized the priest protagonist, the heroic priest protagonist, because you never see that in mainstream entertainment anymore, and you haven't for a very long time. And I think that's a shame, because I think it's something that
you see that a lot.
Right.
You see, like, the evil priest, something like that.
Right, exactly. If you see the last 20 or 30 years or so, if a priest is on a screen, large or small, he's either never doing his job. He's a pedophile, or he's some bumbling moron who somehow doesn't know anything about theology or even the basic tenets of his faith. He's left to be some stuttering foil for the smarmy implied atheist protagonist. Anyway, I hate that. And while I totally appreciate that, yes, you can overdo, you can overdo it and do it very ham-fistedly the other way with the condescending, morally aggrandizing character, that nobody likes just as equally. I wanted to. I've told the story before when I was on your show. I felt as though God gave me this book to write to keep me from falling into a pit of despair. I was struggling with a terrible amount of depression at the time. So I just went about writing this book to keep myself out of trouble.
I've been there. I've done that same thing before.
But while I was writing this book, once I pretty much knew what the story was going to be, I said, I want to make sure I write every single page of this thing. I don't want to lose the reader's attention for a second, not even a page. And so it wound up having a lot of action in it, maybe a little too much. And I just really wanted to make sure that the characters were interesting, that the dialogue was as engaging as it could possibly be, that the horror was as white-knuckled and as gripping as I could possibly write it. And despite my own inexperience, it seemed to have succeeded, mostly anyway. And I actually owe a lot of that to Declan Finn, who, God bless him. I was barely just on Twitter when I started writing seriously. And this guy didn't know me from Adam. And I would reach out to him just because I knew him. I saw him all over the place. I saw all the work that he did, and knew that he was Catholic and that this sort of story would be important to him too. But I reached out to Declan when he didn't even know who I was. And I was like, hey, would you mind kind of reading this excerpt and just tell me what you think? And actually, Declan, the first time, I just had this scene written and I was like, I wonder if this is coming across as well as I hope it is. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, would you read something if I sent it to you? My name's Mike. I'm writing a book, yada, yada. And he said, yeah, sure. Go ahead and send it along. So I sent it to him and it was 800, 1,000 words. And he was like, oh, I thought you were going to send me the book. He was ready to read the book from somebody who just reached out to him and just be like, oh my God, no, I wouldn't do that to you. Which he really appreciated. Not sending a whole manuscript, but that was just that was how cool he was. That was kind of how we started talking. And that seems to have started. And I think people really, you and I, last we talked about how bad horror is. And I think that you and I agree. It's when was the last time you saw a horror movie that actually had a happy ending?
Right.
You can tell that story really well. In fact, some of the best horror movies ever made have had happy endings that didn't have that cliched twist at the end, But I've started calling the Shoot the Devil series heroic horror, and that's sort of what I want to show. And I think that's what a lot of people are hungry for. Yeah, take them down into the depths, take them down into the deepest, darkest, most gore-saturated, terrible depths out of their nightmares, but pick them back up out. So I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place here.
No, you're fine.
So where I get the ideas for my stories. Now here's something that has nothing to do with anything I just said. A lot of ideas for my short fiction, anyway, comes from the most random places you will ever imagine. The first story I ever published, which got published in Cursova magazine last year, called The Nighthawk, came from me remembering an old Johnny Carson joke. Why don't you ever see the headline, Psychic Wins Lottery? And that actually got me thinking, well, if I had psychic powers, I'd probably bet on sports. And I'd probably, because I'm not a gambler and don't know how to be subtle, I would probably catch the attention of somebody who would figure out that something was up with me. And they'd probably want me to bet for them, probably utilizing means that were less than legal. And there my story went. The last story I wrote for Shoot the Devil 2 came from my son, who's a huge into space and shuttles and planets and all this stuff. He loved watching these YouTubes about like top 10 planets, moons, this, that, and the other thing. And I came across this planet that was only recently discovered called TRES-2b. And this thing is horrifying. It's excuse me for 1 second. It's so dark. It is a pitch black planet. It's the darkest planet ever discovered. It's 750 light years away. And it was only discovered because I think the Kepler telescope just barely picked up a light signature in its direction. And astronomers started wondering what's out there. And they discovered that there's an entire planet, a large one. It's a gas giant. It's about the size of Jupiter.
Wow.
And it's barely visible, though. It's completely black because its atmosphere is just full of light absorbing gases. Everything like it reflects less than 1% of the light that is shown on it. That's how dark it is. It's darker than the darkest coal on Earth. And so the interior of this planet, the reason they detected light off of it was because that dark atmosphere creates such an incredible greenhouse effect that the atmosphere's temperature is 1800 degrees. That's incredible. And so it actually superheats the planet itself so much that it glows red. So I want you to imagine this planet that is completely shrouded in darkness, and what little bits of light you can get from it are just a seething hot red that occasionally will escape, combined with the fact that it's only about 3 million miles away from its sun. It's this super hot planet. And I just thought, my God, this is fascinating. It sounds like an evil planet.
Yeah.
And so
like
I got this idea. And so I got this idea of a spacecraft going out into its orbit, and maybe, you know, down through the ages, it's been written about in occult rituals, or you know, somehow mankind has found out about this terrible planet, and that once anyone gets into sort of the orbit of it, it drives you mad if you're not spiritually protected, in a sense. And that's sort of the beginning of the fate that befalls our poor trillionaire magnate in the story. But yeah, at Last Chance Lane, story about a haunted house. I think it was Halloween. I really wanted to write a haunted house story. I love haunted houses. I'm fascinated by them. And so I think I drove by a derelict lot in my town that had this like really crumpled up, rundown house, and the lot was overgrown and it just looked like it was haunted. And I said, okay, there's my haunted house. I'm going to imagine that's the house on that street that all the neighborhood kids are afraid to go into. That's my haunted house. Now, why is it haunted? And then it became, well, a butcher doctor used to run his office out of there. And then, you know, do. But yeah, my short fiction comes out of everywhere and nowhere and will hit me at the damnedest times.
Yeah.
Except for when somebody says, hey, I want you to write a story. Then everything leaves.
I have that happen too. I often make the joke that I get my best ideas for stories when I'm doing the dishes or mowing the lawn. I think it's just the absent-mindedness of it. Because my mind starts wandering. Yeah, exactly. Because I'm doing like some menial task and my mind just is wandering. I'm like, oh, I got it. I also carry like little notepads everywhere I go. I carry like little pieces of paper and notes because I'm always writing stuff down. But it's funny you're talking about the house, like the haunted house kind of thing. In my hometown, there is this house. There was a serial killer in the 1920s named Bertha Gifford who would poison her victims. And she lived in this like white clapboard farmhouse, like on the way out on the far end of town. And when I was a little kid, my grandmother would drive me by there and she said, you know, who lived there. And it always fascinated me. Yeah. And
thanks, Grandma.
It was always fascinating. But I was just like, and she apparently, one of her friends, like the father of one of her friends was killed by this woman, like way back, 1928 and 29, something like that.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and like I still know where the house is. Like, and I've gone by it before. I posted on it on Instagram. I've taken pictures of it. It's like a privately owned residence now, but it's like everyone in town knows that's like the house. So there is that sort of like fascination where you know something terrible has happened there.
Right.
And she would kill them in the house. She would like take care of them, quote unquote, and poison them. And but that's always kind of like the creepy house in town sort of thing. So that does like a powerful kind of
Yeah, and
kind of
actually, in the story Last Chance Lane, I touch on that, the powerful allure.
D&D nerds. Are there any D&D nerds there? That's someone in the chat asked.
Not since third edition. I haven't played in third edition.
D&D nerds here? Anyone here?
I hadn't heard about that. No, oh my god.
I did not know that.
Rest in peace, Jim Ward.
If it doesn't have THAC0, I don't know how to play it.
The one game I could never get into, I never could get into Magic the Gathering. I never could understand the rules properly. No matter how many times people tried to explain it to me. And I was like junior high. It always looked so cool, but man, I don't know.
I used to play that a ton in college, and I haven't played in 25 years. And I tried to play a game recently, and the rules have changed so much that it's like might as well be a different game. But I've got a box that's probably worth a few grand. I need to get it appraised.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They did. Yeah, Magic the Addiction.
Speaking of that, it's like what films or books or comics or whatever had an impact on all three of you when you were like growing up? Like, what is it that what creative like what things made you who you are creatively, so to speak? Let's start with Daniel.
Oh man, I was the weird kid that had the adult library card in third grade, and
oh, that's awesome.
I got in trouble for having it in my desk in school in third grade, and teacher's like, this is really not appropriate for you to be reading." He was absolutely right. I mean, 80% of it went over my head. I just thought, they had a cool cover, and I'm like, this might be good. And so
that's awesome.
I really adore John Delaire's. He had several series. I forget one with a guy named Anthony. He kind of got into adventures with like an elderly neighbor, and then there was The House with the Clock in Its Walls, and that was a series too. I really liked all those. Those were kind of like the gothic urban fantasy sort of, and it's been kind of jam ever since.
All right. How about you, Declan?
Kind of like similar to Dan, except in my case, my library was in the basement. My father had been reading since he was 10 and basically started the library collection from then on. So it's,
awesome.
30, 40, 50 years worth of books, pulled every so often, usually giving away about 20 books every year. And somehow the library never shrunk. And when I mean he's giving away 20 boxes of books every year, I mean Costco boxes full of books, where everyone's going like, nope, these books are too heavy. So I was reading a lot. I wound up reading Jurassic Park just before the movie came out. I was 10.
I did that too. I was one of the few people that I actually knew that actually had read the book. I think it was in 6th grade, and I just thought the cover of the book was cool, and I bought it. And when the movie came out, everyone's like, "Oh, the movie's cool," and I was like, the book ends a little differently.
I was super disappointed. I was expecting them to be shooting rocket launchers at the dinosaurs and stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
It was like, wow, the head of security's got rocket launchers because dinosaurs.
Right.
Like, oh no, we're going to give the head of security a shotgun.
Yeah.
That annoyed me, but that's a different conversation. But no, I was reading pretty much anything I could get my hands on since as far back as I could remember. I fell into writing with fan fiction. I didn't know it was called fan fiction then. I didn't know anybody actually did this damn near full time from some of the fan fiction sites I've seen nowadays. And basically, yeah, after a while, I found, yes, I've rewired my brain, so it's always on. And I have to make notes, otherwise, my brain isn't going to shut up and I'm not going to sleep tonight. You know, stuff like that. So I got warped early. 16 was when I started writing, and I haven't been able to turn it off since. So, yeah.
What about you, Michael?
Well, again, I think you and I had talked a little bit about this the first time I was on the show. My dad read voraciously, just about anything. And in our storeroom in our little apartment in Brooklyn, he had boxes and boxes of paperbacks that he had collected over the years. And a lot of what he had from back in another time before he had kids were paperback anthologies of science fiction published by Playboy, of all people.
I remember that. Yeah.
They used to publish some of the biggest names in science fiction in anthologies, and the old man had a lot of them. But that's where I read my first short story from Ray Bradbury. It was in one of those anthologies, because I'm not gonna lie, I saw Playboy and I started reading it, not thinking like for different reasons. I wound up liking it, just not for the reason I'd hoped initially. But he also had like the Martian Chronicles in there. He had Something Wicked This Way Comes. He liked Ray Bradbury too. He had an anthology of really cheap, 50-cent yellow page paperback. Those old pocketbooks. He had an old little anthology of H.P. Lovecraft stories, and
cool.
First H.P. Lovecraft stories I ever read were from my old man's paperbacks. And so that was sort of got me introduced to some science fiction. And I then
got some right there.
I actually have that. I have that up in my once I started reading H.P. Lovecraft, I started reading everything I could find the guy. I was buying anthologies and buying there's a great anthology of Lovecraft inspired stuff called Cthulhu 2000. It's hard to find now because it hasn't been in print for a long time. But there's some really great stuff in there. But I was like reading other anthologies by other people and just so Bradbury and Lovecraft were kind of the two big cornerstones in terms of weird fiction, but in very different ways. Bradbury's weird fiction was a very different flavor than Lovecraft's, obviously. Then, I got to college and they had me reading Arthur Clarke and Isaac Asimov, and I nearly completely lost interest in science fiction because I kept reading Arthur Clarke saying like, okay, this is going to get good. This is going to get interesting eventually. This guy's like one of the biggest names. 2001, 2010, 2069, childhood science. Okay, and finally, I'm just like, okay. You've got the kids in a sex lottery here in this dystopic, world. Where's the silver lining here? Childhood end is miserable. Then a cousin of mine, thankfully, lent me a copy of Walpurgis 3 by Mike Resnick, and I fucking fell in love with Mike Resnick's science fiction. That was space pulp right there. Santiago. Good God, the Soothsayer trilogy, the Widowmaker trilogy, the like everything pretty much up until 2000. I kind of stopped reading him, so I didn't read his like mill sci-fi, which I hear is also very good. But God, I read everything I could get my hands on from Mike Resnick. And so there you have it. Weird, heroic, pulpy. That was my jam. And so I loved science fiction. I loved that sort of stuff as a reader. And with the book, which I only published in 2022. I really haven't been doing this for very long. I started reading more and more guys that I heard, guys like Declan and Daniel talking about. I only recently have actually been introduced to Robert E. Howard, and now he's my favorite writer. Clark Ashton Smith, arguably, here's my hot take for the night. You ready? This is the hate tweet for the next day. Clark Ashton Smith, I think, is actually a little better at prose than Lovecraft, even. right now I'm devouring everything I can get my hands on from Clark Ashton Smith. I can't get enough of it. So yeah, that was kind of thank you Playboy magazine, and thank you to my old man's paperbacks for getting me into science fiction.
I'm a big Lovecraft fan myself. I would agree with your statement about Clark Ashton Smith, only because what I love about Lovecraft is the ideas, but his prose is, I mean, it's kind of hard to get into. Like purposely archaic and slow, and characters act like idiots sometimes, but the ideas behind them are, big. But
You know what's
his
funny about
characters act
that?
like his characters just act like idiots sometimes. They're like the ones when they go into the basement, and you're like, don't go into the basement. They're like, we have to go into this basement.
They do, but you know what's funny about that is while I'm reading it, I can actually excuse that because more often than not, his protagonists are like intellectuals.
True. Yeah,
So
yeah.
when they start adventuring out into actual adventuring, I say, yeah, you're going to make some stupid decisions. You don't have any guns. You don't have, all you got is a lantern and a cat. You guys are going to die.
When I was a kid, I was
things about
oh, I'm sorry.
Lovecraft. I mean, I like
Mhm.
I like the feel and the tone and the world, but
Yeah.
the one thing about the stories that don't really appeal to me, that I kind of try to go against in my own writing, is there's not much hope there. I mean, you
Right.
encounter
Yeah.
Cthulhu or one of his minions. I mean, I forget where it was, but it was a review of a RPG that basically was Call of Cthulhu but with guns, and basically it said, instead of having to do a sand check every time you see a monster, you just start shooting. That really resounded with me.
There's a
yeah.
great book series based on the RPG game, the RPG series Arkham Horror. I reviewed this book, The Wrapping Deep, about 6 months ago. It's all Lovecraftian inspired stories, but they are very, very pulpy. A lot of action, a lot of humor, a lot of fun mixed in.
There you
So
go.
if you're looking for something, this one was written by a guy named Tim Pratt, but they have an entire series worth in the back, written by different writers. Excellent, very fun. That's like Lovecraft the way it should be, like fast paced, pulp action. There was people running around in these tunnels, fighting ghouls to get out of this like giant occult mansion. It was excellent.
I think it's telling that two of his biggest, most lasting stories, The Call of Cthulhu and The Shadow over Innsmouth, are two that have the most action in it and are the closest to pulp. You've got Call of Cthulhu, we've got the police raid on the swamp with the occult in like mid ceremony, and of course Shadow over Innsmouth, which is like actually a proper horror pulp novel that has about as happy an ending as you can expect from Lovecraft. But I mean, when he manages to kind of venture into those waters, he created something great. He just didn't get in very often.
Right. And they all lived happily ever. No, wait, no, they're all dead or insane.
Yeah,
they all live happily ever after he's transformed into a fish person under the sea.
Yeah.
And I think Lovecraft was a fairly miserable person in his day-to-day life, and that definitely extended to his fiction.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
I read recently, I had a tweet blow the frick up because I posted on the date of his death recently, was March 15th. And I was doing a little bit of reading about him, and it turns out he came from an incredibly inbred family. And as a result, he was very physically fragile, and he was just basically constantly uncomfortable. And he was, if it wasn't the immigrants or just being sick all the time, or people around him dying, I mean, the guy had a
miserable life, pretty much.
He had a miserable life.
He had a miserable life and a miserable outlook to life, also. Like I always I like his fiction, but I always get the impression that if I knew him in real life, he'd be like I mean, he'd be like a nerd god because he knew everything about, if
Right.
he existed today, he would be like the troll on the internet. He'd be like the dude living in the basement. He'd be like the dude
Which is
living in
what-
his mom's basement.
H.P.
Like,
Lovecraft is a Reddit moderator.
yeah,
which
exactly.
Which oddly enough, when I, when I read about like
But
him being
he
friends
wouldn't
and
be a guy
correspondent,
that's very pleasant to be around. Like,
right? Yeah, which makes the fact that he was friends with a guy like Robert E. Howard, who's like lifting weights and
yeah,
grew up
very
in a Texas
gregarious and
oil boom
outgoing,
town,
right?
and
Yeah.
and and Clark Ashton Smith, who's this like really chill poet, who's like mellow and not miserable. These three guys are like I want to see a buddy movie with them somehow.
Oh, that's a good
if the
idea.
three of them somehow got together and went on a road trip in like the middle of the 30s or something, it would be the friggin' best.
Would be great.
REHHP
Oh, man.
LNCAS hit the road,
Yeah. H.P. Lovecraft, I get the distinct impression he'd be like Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. He'd be just like, he'd just be Lovecraft right there in the modern day. He'd be like real fussy, very, hard to get along with.
Timid.
Like, yeah, timid.
Constantly mopping his brow,
Yeah. Like, oh my God. And always pissing people off. Like, no matter what he says, like, everyone just gets angry. He's like, what did I say to you? Yeah. When I was a kid, my elementary school was a converted Air Force base. It was a missile base. It was a Nike missile base. And they converted it into a grade school. But the library they had there was an adult library. They just left all the books there. So that was really cool. Because I was like I remember Daniel said he was much more advanced as a reader. I remember being in third grade, and I remember distinctly one time when we were going to the library as a class, and I was disturbed at myself because I was more advanced as a reader than a lot of my classmates were. And I remember one week I was like, okay, I'll try to get some kiddie book, just because. And I read it in like 5 minutes, put it in the desk, and it's like I was disappointed because I didn't have anything to read for the next week. So I was like, okay, I'm not making that mistake again. But I remember distinctly that was very interesting. And then later on, like as a teenager, I discovered H.G. Wells, Lovecraft. I got into Neil Gaiman after that because I love like his style of urban fantasy, and the Sandman comics because I was a big comic book fan also. That was actually one of my goals when I was a teenager. I wanted to write and draw comic books. And later on, I got into Harry Turtledove. Is probably my if I had to pick one sci-fi writer of all time, he would probably be my favorite. I've read just about everything he's written. I love time travel and alternate history. So, but I love all that the pulpy feel to it. So Clark and Howard have a dark and beautiful traits of words. The difference between Clark and Howard. The Clark, the hero, makes no difference. With Howard, the hero doesn't care. Maybe. So Michael had a good idea. Michael had a good idea in his email to me today that everybody should read an excerpt from one of their stories. I think that would be really cool.
Surprise.
Surprise. Is everyone cool with that? Would everyone like to do that?
Okay.
All right. Let's start with you, Daniel.
And pull it up here. I can find it. The computer blew up on me last week, and I'm still in recovery.
Ah.
Let's see. Shorts. There we go. All right, so I will do an exorcism for the demon. That's the lead story in Shoot the Devil 1. And then how much first page or so, or
However much you feel comfortable reading. Page,
Okay.
2 page, whatever.
Okay. So it starts out, call me Paxton, I said, taking a seat. Lock, Paxton Lock, license to dispel. The cool thing for wizards to do, if you believe the fiction section of the library, is to advertise in the Yellow Pages. I'm a millennial. I wouldn't even know where to find the Yellow Pages. Plus, Craigslist is free. When I first started doing this professionally, I didn't have to worry about marketing, but striking out on my own introduced me to an entirely new set of challenges. It had only been 3 months, but I'd rapidly developed a nose for bull. My current client sounded like the real deal on the phone, but something about his tone made me uncertain. That was why I asked to meet instead of going directly to his house, just in case this was some sort of prank or hidden camera stunt. Go figure. Most people don't take an online ad offering to clean up haunted houses seriously. But when you have a real problem, you'll take any lifeline you can find. Ray Ramsey sounded like a guy that needed a lifeline, but the man sitting on the other side of the table looked calm enough. Too calm? That remained to be seen. He wore a blue DePaul baseball cap, the stylized outline of a demonic face staring out with red eyes under the white stitching of the university's name. Hey, it's Dibs, I said, referring to the only mascot in college basketball with an acronym, the demon in a blue suit. My dad went to DePaul. His face was craggy and well tanned, his forearms muscular and his hands calloused. Older than me for sure, but built well. Construction worker, maybe? I didn't generally go for background checks. Maybe that's something I should look into. I dismissed the thought. No matter what he did for a living, his down payment cleared in my PayPal account, so I made the trip. Let's see here. You're younger than I expected, he said, his eyes flickering away for a moment. He was looking at my hair, I knew. It turned white when I was 16. It's the most visible symptom of everything I went through to reach this point. That's like page and a half, so that's like a submission, I'd say.
That's awesome. That's very good, and that's very enticing too, because it makes you want to read more. Right. Who we got next? Michael, you want to go next?
Sure.
Right.
This is from Shoot the Devil 2 Dark Matter. I'm going to be reading a scene from TJ Marquis' story Demon Bridge, in which a team of commandos has been tasked with hunting down a spaceship. It's like a prototype spaceship that's being entirely driven by an experimental AI. And of course, it's gone rogue. It's gone into a sector that no one can really track it down. They found it, and they are boarding the ship, and this sort of details their first contact. Screams echoed down the dim hall, a sound almost androgynous in its desperation. But Thomas and Snake Division kept their spirits in check and segmented the wider hall, weapons ready. There were tracks for carts and wheeled drones and color-coded lights for directing traffic overhead. But the hall was empty and still. Might have a third party here, Thomas said. Advance, Major ordered. Any contact? KOS. In the long, resonant chamber, it was hard to pin down where the screams of pain and horror were coming from. Only as the team moved closer did it become more apparent. Medicals down that hall, Creep observed. Parallel to bridge access, Sting said. We can check it out, clear and cut through the side hall. Let's do it, said Crush. Riggs and Thomas flanked the next corridor's opening, covering the others as they bounded in. Crush ended up on point again, and just then a scav scrambled out of the medical bay on the far end of the hall, yelling and babbling, the whites of his eyes like lamps in the dim space. Thomas picked out part of what he was saying. Akuma! Kuran ni Akuma Gairu! Not one to mince words, Crush put the scav down. His body tumbled onto the deck, a burning hole in his torso. Something about clones? Thomas mused. This wasn't supposed to be a science vessel, Busker noted. Shut it, was Major's response. Stay tight. But the screams had stopped. Someone was sobbing, and there was a soft, rustling, wet sound, like nothing Thomas had heard before. Snake Division inched closer to the bay. They were near the open hatch now, and to Thomas, it sounded like someone was pleading. Then a soggy, crunching sound Tomas had heard once before, and the spilling of blood and gray matter onto a hard steel floor.
That's excellent. I like that.
I'm out. I'd be like, nope, AWOL. Where's the nearest airlock? Shoot me out of it.
All right, Declan, your turn.
Okay. Again, from Shoot the Devil 2, the one Mike just held up. Mark of Cain, 2358, Alexandria Space Station. Sean Patrick Ryan was considered the most dangerous human in the galaxy. Part of that was being 2 meters tall and 1 wide. Another part was being a telepath. Yet another part was having a mind flexible enough to attack problems from different angles. Sean left his mind open, listening to the thoughts of the world around him as he wandered the corridors of Space Station Alexandria. It was his version of people watching, just mentally eavesdropping. And then the screaming growls in Aramaic ripped through his brain hard enough to knock him sideways. Sean crashed against some burly Soyvans. The 2 aliens caught him and considerately redirected him to the wall, bracing him there. He was clearly in pain, though he hadn't been struck. Sean clamped down on his mind to block out the noise. Despite the pain being purely mental, he even checked his eyes and ears to make sure they weren't bleeding. Sean glanced at the Soyvan and gave them a wan smile. His lightning blue eyes flickered a moment. He staggered and caught himself. He waved the 2 Soyvan off and gave them his thanks. They glanced at each other, shrugged at the humans' antics, and went about their day. Sean braced himself against the wall and scanned the crowded hall for what had hit him. No one paid any attention to him. For someone to launch a telepathic attack, especially against another telepath, they at least need to pay attention to their target. And if it wasn't an target, if it wasn't an attack, did I just get hit with thoughts just by telepathically eavesdropping? Sean shook it off. He needed to get back to his room and lay down, preferably before he fell down. As he fought his way down the hall, he struggled to replay what he had heard. Despite it being 2358, Aramaic was a dead language. Latin was more alive, especially since it had become the language of the Catholic Mass again after the restoration of 2080. Sean only understood Aramaic because he grew up in a monastery. His telepathic power level came with an eidetic memory. On the one hand, that meant nothing escaped the trap of his memory. On the other hand, that meant he needed a memory palace just to keep it all sorted. Unfortunately, Sean knew one word immediately. It was the simplest word in the screaming, growling rant that had rocked Sean's brain. The word was Legio. Sean didn't even need to know the language to understand it. It meant Legion. And that's the end of the first page.
Whew.
Excellent. All 3 of those excerpts are amazing.
Yeah.
And that should whet the appetite for any writer who wants to submit to Shoot the Devil 3, Martyr's Militia. And on that note, I think we've probably reached the end of tonight's show. So I want to thank everyone for being guests tonight. I want to thank you, Declan, Daniel, Michael. And it was fun having you on the show, and we look forward to having you back when Shoot the Devil 3 comes out. And for any writers out there who want to submit to the 3rd volume of Shoot the Devil, the contact information is on the Shoot the Devil WordPress website.
Yes.
Michael knows it.
Go to shootthedevil.wordpress.com/FAQ. The email address is there. It's gingermaneditor@gmail.com, but check it just in case I just got that wrong mentally. And if you have any questions at all, you can reach out to Eric directly, either through that email address or through the contact page on the website. So check it out. Submissions are due May 1st.
Excellent. And don't forget to head on over to Amazon for the other two Shoot the Devil books, Shoot the Devil and Shoot the Devil 2, Dark Matter. And remember, if you like tonight's show, like, share, subscribe, and Critical Blast, and damn show is done.
Now, wasn't that pleasant? Thank you for not screaming too loudly during the interview. The ushers will now flip the switch to run the electric current through your seats. And remember, once your flesh has grown back onto your charred bones, do come back for more. Some other damn time, same damn channel.